Now, some people watching this in Australia will hear this story and immediately say, well, that's France, Thomas. That's Europe. They got different laws. Couldn't happen here. Couldn't it? We've already got Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act sitting on the books. A woman goes on television in France. She talks about immigration. She talks about women's safety. She says something the establishment doesn't like. Now, in a healthy society, what happens next? Someone disagrees with her. Someone debates her. Someone brings better evidence and proves her wrong. That's how it's supposed to work. But that's not what's happening here. Prosecutors are asking for prison time, up to 1 year and a €45,000 fine just to top it off, for words spoken on television. They didn't debate her. They didn't bring a counter argument. They brought a criminal charge. And here's the question that sticks with you long after the headlines fade. When did protecting people from hate become protecting the system from criticism? Because those are not the same job. One protects the vulnerable, the other protects the powerful. And somewhere along the way, the line got blurry, very blurry. This is the case of Thaïs. And whether you agree with her or not is beside the point. The point is much bigger than her. Because if the state gets to decide which fears are legal and which are criminal, you don't have free speech anymore. You have a permit to speak, and permits can be revoked. Welcome back to another episode of the Thomas Cut. I'm just going to throw it out there today. Excuse my French. I'm going to do the very best I can to pronounce everything correctly, so bear with me. Thaïs is a French activist and online commentator. She's not some random person who wandered into a TV studio. She's politically controversial. She was linked to Generation Identity, a movement that French government dissolved back in 2021. So let's be straight about this from the jump, from the get-go. She's not neutral. She's not soft. She's not some lifestyle influencer talking about skincare or the latest clothing range. She's political. She's confrontational. And the French establishment already knew exactly who she is. But that's what makes this case so revealing, because the system always does it. It picks the easiest person to dislike, then uses that person to set the precedent. You ever notice that? They don't go after the popular, beloved figure everyone would rally behind. They go after the controversial ones, the polarizing ones, the ones where half the public say, well, I don't agree with her anyway, so why should I care? And then quietly the precedent is set. And it doesn't just apply to her anymore. It applies to everyone. The case stems from BFM TV, an appearance in 2023. The discussion was about a young woman who had allegedly been raped by a man under an order to leave France. That detail matters. This wasn't a dry academic debate about immigration statistics. This was a conversation about women's safety after a violent crime, and during that conversation, Thaïs said the line that started all of this. She said the main danger for women was immigrant men, and she named specific categories. Now, I'm not here to repeat that line as a slogan. I'm not here to tell you every person from any group is guilty of anything. That would be lazy and stupid. That would be the exact kind of thinking they want this conversation reduced to. Now, individuals commit crimes. Individuals should be punished. Innocent people should never be smeared because of what someone else did. That's very important. That's basic. But here's the issue. The French state didn't just argue with her. The French state went legal. The government body responsible for fighting racism and hate referred the matter after her TV appearance. Then came prosecution, and prosecutors reportedly asked for up to 1 year in prison and, to top it off, as mentioned before, a €45,000 fine for incitement to racial hatred. What is that? Now, I want you to see something. This is her speaking about what's happening, talking about the changes, waiting for the results.
Dear European and American patriots, I need your help. Tomorrow, I may be sentenced to unsuspended prison for daring to say on French TV that the main danger to women in France comes from black African and Arab immigrant men, even though I was defending a woman who was herself raped by a Central African man subject to an OQTF order in the courtyard of her Paris apartment building. Having myself survived an attempted rape by a Tunisian migrant 4 years ago, I could not remain silent. But for having spoken these words on a television set, the prosecutor has sought a prison sentence against me. She dismissed our two stories as insignificant incidents which did not excuse my hate speech. Yet, all I did was describe a reality that most French people are afraid to speak about, precisely because the justice system is capable of convicting them for describing what they see with their own eyes and experience firsthand. This is the repression faced by people in France who speak the truth out loud. But thanks to you, I have hope ahead of the verdict, which will be handed down tomorrow. Just yesterday, I was still hesitating to publish my story, thinking nobody would notice, and it has now spread beyond our borders. And thanks to this media pressure, the justice system may back down before trying to send me to prison.
Seriously, what is going on in this world? Look at that. Just look at what we just watched. A woman sitting there explaining that she's facing prison, not because she hurt anyone, not because she stole anything. If anything, she was the one that was in danger from an attempted rape. She didn't commit fraud or violence or vandalism. She said something on television, and now she has to wait like a defendant in a criminal trial to find out if the state would take a year off her life away in prison for 1 year and a 45,000 euro fine for words. Now ask yourself something. If a woman says she feels unsafe because of patterns she believes she sees in society, is that answer to debate her or to punish her? Because those are two very different civilizations. One civilization says prove your argument. The other says prepare your defense. This is where the whole thing turns from a French news story into a warning sign for the entire West. Because once the state starts treating uncomfortable opinions as legal problems, every citizen starts calculating before they even speak. And that's the point. Not to win the debate, to make the debate too expensive to even enter. Now, some people watching this in Australia will hear this story and immediately say, well, that's France, Thomas. That's Europe. They got different laws. Couldn't happen here. Couldn't it? We've already got Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act sitting on the books. A law that makes it unlawful to offend, insult, humiliate, or intimidate someone based on their race. And before you say, well, Thomas, that's just about protecting people from genuine hate, ask yourself this. Who decides what's offensive? It's a fair question. Who decides what's insulting? Is it the person who spoke or the person who claims to be hurt? Which is it? Because if the answer is the person who claims to be hurt, then you don't have free speech. You have a veto, and anyone with a grievance and a lawyer gets to shut down a conversation they don't like. Now, that's not hypothetical. We've seen Section 18C used against university students, sports commentators, radio hosts, TV presenters, against even ordinary Australians who said something that someone somewhere decided was out of bounds. The case drags on, the legal fees pile up, and even if the complaint eventually gets thrown out, the lesson has already been taught. Say the wrong thing and your life becomes paperwork. Your character gets destroyed in the media. This is the same machinery. You need to realize that, just at different speeds. France is the acceleration. Australia is the slow burn, but the engine is identical. You need to see this. Under French law, public incitement to hatred, violence, or discrimination, all of that can be criminal. Here in Australia, we're not at prison yet, but give it time because the direction of travel is the same. The state says, we're not banning the topic, we're just making sure it's discussed respectively. And that sounds reasonable until you realize that respectively always ends up meaning in a way that doesn't make the authorities uncomfortable. Now, I want you to think about this. Think about this. Imagine you're driving down a road and the speed limit keeps changing, but there are no signs. You can't see anything. You don't know what the speed limit is. You just know that if you get it wrong, they're going to impound your car. Question is, how fast do you drive? Well, you crawl. You go way slower than you need to. You don't enjoy the drive anymore. You just survive it. That's what happens to speech when the rules are vague and the penalties are severe. People don't just avoid breaking the law, they avoid the whole conversation. They park the car and walk. They don't have to ban the topic outright. They just make the topic legally radioactive. This is very important. You can technically still talk about immigration. You can technically still talk about women's safety. But if you connect those subjects in the wrong way, with the wrong words while being the wrong person, suddenly that conversation turns into a courtroom, or at the very least, a human rights commission complaint that drains your time, your money, and your nerves. That is not freedom. That is permission. Freedom is when you can speak and be challenged. Permission is when you speak and pray the state doesn't decide you crossed an invisible line. And the invisible line always moves. Today, it's France putting a woman on trial for a television appearance. Tomorrow, it's an Australian court deciding whether your Facebook comment meets the threshold for criminal offense. The machine doesn't care about the accent. It only cares about the precedent. When the law becomes vague enough, silence becomes the safest opinion. You need to understand that. And that's how a society becomes managed. Not because everyone agrees, because everyone gets careful. Everyone lowers their voice. And once the public starts policing its own thoughts before the authorities even arrive, the system has already won. Doesn't matter if you're in Paris or if you're in Melbourne or in Sydney, the outcome is identical. And here's the part that really exposes the whole thing. And I want you to pay close attention to this, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. For years, we've been told one thing over and over again. Listen to women, believe women, protect women, women's safety matters. And look, good, it does matter. Women should be able to walk down the street without fear. Women should be able to get on a train, go for a run, walk home at night, go out with their friends, live their life without calculating risk every 5 seconds. That should not be controversial. But watch what happens when a woman points her fear in the wrong political direction. Suddenly the tone changes. Suddenly it's not listen to women, it's careful what you say. Suddenly her fear has to go through an ideological checkpoint. Suddenly the state becomes very interested in the wording. That's the contradiction. They say women's safety is sacred until women's safety threatens the narrative. Then the narrative becomes scared. Now, I'm going to show you something and I need you to watch it. So we got here a Libyan migrant rapes female. I mean, what a disgrace that is. 17 years old, dragging a 32-year-old into the bushes in front of the Eiffel Tower and only stopping because screams were heard. Absolute disgrace. And this one here should even make even your blood boil even more. What is that? You know, a French grandmother, 91, was found in her apartment naked, couldn't even dress herself, and he's not even in charge for rape. And was it a Pakistani immigrant? So that literally makes my blood boil. Both cases I mean, if that was, my sister in the previous one, or, my grandmother, God forbid, any of these things happen, I would want to kill him. I mean, that is just, seriously, man, people are mentally cooked at the moment. And what's even worse is that our society, for some reason, is even allowing this crap. Excuse my language, but it's true. It's like, why have we become so soft? Why are men allowing this shit to happen? That's what I want to know. And I don't care if I swear. These two articles in particular get me really angry. Now, I want to go back to what we were just discussing. A 32-year-old woman dragged into the bushes near the Eiffel Tower. People heard her screaming. A 91-year-old grandmother, beaten to death in her own apartment, found naked, couldn't even dress herself, and the man who did it won't even face a rape charge. Now, you tell me, if you're a woman living in France and you read those two stories in the same week, same months, whatever, what are you supposed to think? What are you supposed to feel? Are you supposed to sit there and say, well, these are isolated incidences, no pattern here, nothing to see? Or are you supposed to be allowed to say out loud in public without a lawyer present, I'm scared and I see a pattern and I want something to be done about it? But wait, before you answer that, I want to show you one more thing. Because while governments across Europe are burying crime statistics, silencing victims, and calling it cultural differences, something else has been happening. Something that tells you everything about how broken this system really is.
Stop. Don't
Good
touch
old
me
Finland.
there. This is my no-no square. Stop. Don't touch me there. This is my no-no square.
That's Finland right there. A Nordic country, one of the most progressive places on earth. And that there is this solution to women being assaulted at record rates, not deportation, not prosecution, not a single politician standing up and saying, if you come here and you commit a violent crime or violence crimes against women, you're gone. No, a song, a dance, a nursery rhyme for grown men, like it's the Wiggles for children. It's actually comedic. I can't. I want to laugh, but it's a serious situation. It's just, like I mentioned before, society at the moment, we are in a real bad place. We seriously need a factory reset. We are so gone. It's like a nursery rhyme for grown men. Stop. Don't touch me. Don't touch me there. This is my no-no square. Think about what that tells you. The state knows the assaults are happening. They have the data. They know who the victims are. They know who the perpetrators are. And instead of protecting the women, they made a video teaching the men not to rape. As if the problem is that nobody ever told them. As if a 17-year-old dragging a tourist from the Ukraine into the bushes near the Eiffel Tower just needed a catchy tune and some hand gestures. It's not ignorance. It's not a communication gap. It's a choice. The system has decided that protecting certain sensitivities is more important than protecting actual women. So instead of enforcing the law equally, they write a song. Instead of deporting violent criminals, they choreograph a dance. Instead of admitting the problem, they infantilizes the perpetrators and leave the victims to fend for themselves. And then when a woman like Thaïs stands up and says the obvious, I'm scared, I see a pattern, they don't play her a song, they don't give her a dance tutorial, they give her a criminal charge. One woman gets prison or possible prison for speaking, the other woman gets a nursery rhyme for their safety. Both things tell you who the system actually cares about. And it's not the women. The machine moves quicker to punish the sentence than to explain why the sentence exists. That's why this story matters, not because everyone should copy her wording. They shouldn't. If you talk about groups instead of systems and individuals, you give your enemies the easiest weapon in the world. But the bigger question remains, why does the state seem more offended by the words than by the fear behind them? Why is the person pointing at the fire in more trouble than the arsonists? And again, this is not about saying Thaïs is automatically right about everything. If she's wrong, prove her wrong. Bring data, bring arguments, bring facts, debate, destroy the argument in public. That's how debate works. But when the response is prosecution, people naturally ask, are you trying to stop hate? Or are you trying to stop the question? Because those are not the same. Now, I need to be fair about something else here, and this is important. Thaïs Dieskvon is the perfect target for the system. She's controversial, she's identitarian, she's been involved in previous legal cases, she has a political history that makes half the media switch off before she even opens her mouth. And that's exactly why they use people like her, because the public gets distracted by the messenger and misses the mechanism. The system says, don't worry, this is just about her. She's extreme, she's dangerous, she's not like you. And maybe you don't like her, maybe you disagree with her. Maybe you think her wording was reckless. Fine. But here's the question. Do you want the state using criminal law to decide which political claims are allowed to exist? It's a fair question. Because if the answer is yes, just remember something. The state you trust today may not be the state that rules tomorrow. The people that you cheer against your enemy will eventually be used against someone you like. That's how power works. It never stays in the lane you imagine. That is why free speech has to protect people you don't like. It's easy to defend speech you agree with. That costs nothing. The real test is whether you defend the right to say something uncomfortable without pretending the words were perfect. And this is where modern society is failing bad. People don't defend principles anymore. They don't. They defend teams. If our side says it's brave. If their side says it's hate. If our side generalizes, it's speaking truth. If their side generalizes, it's incitement. That is not justice. That's a team sport with legal consequences. A society that only believes in free speech for approved people doesn't believe in free speech. It believes in branding. And this case shows you exactly how it works. Pick the controversial women. Put the most inflammatory sentences on trial. Ignore the deeper fear. Make the issues about her personality. Then teach everyone watching it at home the lessons. Say the wrong thing and your life becomes paperwork. Now let's zoom out for a second, because France is not alone. Across the West, the public is noticing the same pattern. Crime happens, women feel unsafe. Communities get tense, borders become a political theatre. Governments pretend everything is under control. And when ordinary people ask basic questions, the system doesn't say, let's investigate. It says, careful, careful with your words, careful with your tone, careful with your conclusions, careful who you blame, mate, careful what patterns you notice, careful what you post on social media, careful what you say on television. And after a while, people start to understand the problem isn't just what happened. The problem is what you've allowed to say about what happened. That's why this connects to everything we have been talking about on this channel thus far. Henry Nowak in Southampton, Stefan Ogilvie in Belfast, women attacked in European cities, communities losing trust, police being asked to manage consequences they didn't even create, politicians refusing to answer the root questions. And then when people finally speak out, the system acts completely shocked. What radicalized them? No, that's the wrong question. What silenced everyone else? What made normal people feel like only controversial voices were willing to say what they were thinking? Because that's what happens when polite society stops telling the truth. The blunt people take over. The angry people take over. Not because they're always right, but because everyone else is too scared to even speak. And then the establishment acts confused. Why are people listening to these figures? Because you left a vacuum. That's why. You made honesty expensive. You made normal speech dangerous. You made every difficult topic feel like you're walking through a minefield. And then you wondered why people started following anyone who sounded fearless. This is the real warning. If government keep criminalizing the language of concern, they will not remove concern. They will radicalize it. They will push it underground. They will make people stop trusting institutions altogether, I'm telling you. And once the public believes the state is not protecting truth, but managing reality, you don't get trust back with another campaign poster. I'll tell you that. You don't. You don't get it back with another diversity seminar. You get it back by letting people ask ugly questions in public and answering them like adults. A system confident in the truth does not need to prosecute every uncomfortable sentence. Confidence debates. Fear prosecutes. That's the difference. So here's where I land. I don't think every line Thaïs Discvon said should be copied. I don't think entire groups of innocent people should be treated like suspects because of where they come from. That's not justice. That's just another lazy collective punishment. But I also don't think the state should be able to drag a woman through court because she expressed a fear the establishment hates hearing. Both things can be true. You can reject racial hatred and still defend free speech. You can criticize reckless wording and still oppose prison for political speech. You can care about minority communities and still ask whether women are safe. That's called being an adult. But unfortunately, adulthood is exactly what modern politics is missing. Everything is childish now. Good person, bad person, approved speech, dangerous speech, protective narrative, forbidden question. And the people in charge love it that way because childish societies are easy to control. You got to hear that again. They are easy to control. The real question is not whether you like Thaïs Discvon. The real question is whether you want to live in a society where the state decides which fears are legal. Because once fear itself has to be approved, you are no longer a citizen. You are a managed subject. You can speak when permitted, think within guidelines, noticing with limits. And if you step outside the approved script, they don't debate you. They process you. That is the warning. Today, it's a French activist you may not like. Tomorrow, it's a journalist. Then it's a mother. Then it's a father. Then it's you. Because the machine never stops at the person you hate. It stops when everyone obeys. So ask yourself, are they protecting people from hate or protecting power from the truth? Because those are not the same thing. And if you can't tell the difference anymore, that's exactly how they wanted it. If you keep having the conversations the polite class won't, hit subscribe. I'm Thomas, and this is the Thomas Cut. I'll see you on the next one.